So whenever we are building the Apex functionalities or the custom business logics, then we are using so many fundamental building blocks. Apex programming is providing so many fundamental building blocks which we can use in order to write the Apex programming code, to build your business logics, to build your validations, to build your complex transactional flows. So upon building the business logic, we are going to be using so many fundamental building blocks. So every programming language will provide so many fundamental building blocks through which we can write some small programs. And when moving forward, once you feel comfortable with the programming, then we can build your own business logics, your own functionalities by your own. So that when coming to the Apex programming, Apex is also providing so many fundamental building blocks. So as part of those fundamental building blocks, they have given the various of features like data types. They have given the features like as conditional statements, iterative statements, so many operators. So many features has been given by the Apex programming language also. By using these fundamental building blocks, we'll implement some small business logics. And when moving forward, we'll implement some complex transactions also. That possibility is there. Now we'll see what are the various of fundamental building blocks has been given by the Apex programming. And then as part of these fundamental building blocks, what exactly the data type, what it represents, we'll see practically here. And what type of data types are available in our Apex programming language, we'll see practically one by one. Okay, now let's see the data types. Now, so what exactly the data type, what is the use? Now let's see practically. So what do you mean by a data type basically here? What a data type describes? What it indicates? Okay. What type of data that variable can hold? That already we have discussed in our initial concepts. During the configuration, we have created so many fields inside our object. Okay. In order to store your application specific data or business specific data, inside that object we have added so many fields. Upon adding the fields, we are selecting some field type or data type, which indicates what type of data that column can hold. Whether that column can hold only the numerical values, or decimal values, or the string values, or the date values, or the Boolean values. So we are indicating by selecting the data types, where Salesforce has given almost 18 to 19 types of data types has been given by Salesforce, which we have used, which we have discussed the data types and their properties also we have discussed during that time. Like the similar way, whenever we are going to be writing some piece of code, upon executing that code, in order to hold some input values temporarily for some time, we need to define some variables. In order to hold that input values temporarily for some time, in order to hold the result temporarily for some time, we need to hold that value. For that one, we are defining some variables. At that time, we have to use that variable has to be defined with the respective data type. Why? Because Apex is purely a tightly coupled programming language. Apex is purely a tightly coupled programming language where we have to define the variable first before its usage. Okay? Before using that variable, first of all, it has to be get defined. Like for example, come to a general scenario. Assume that I'm having the value some 5,000. Okay? Then I want to store this value inside a variable. Generally in the other programming languages, we are going to be writing some x equals to some 5,000. That means here we are storing the value 5,000 inside the variable called as x. Now in this case, in order to store this value 5,000, how much memory do I need to allocate for my x variable? Do I need to allocate 4 bytes of memory, 6 bytes of memory, 12 bytes of memory, how much? So for that one, we have to indicate here what type of data that we are going to store inside this variable here. For that one, we have to use data type. Okay, we have to use data type. So basically, data type describes two things. Data type describes two things. What type of data the variable can hold, And the second one, in order to hold that data, how much memory needs to be get reserved. Okay, how much memory needs to be get reserved. Suppose if you did not specify any data type, if you are storing simply the value 5000 inside the x variable, for this x variable, how much memory do I need to allocate? If you are allocating more memory as a compiler, if you are allocating more memory, if you are not using that all the memory, if you are using only some amount of memory, then remaining memory will be getting wastage. Suppose if you are allocating very less amount of memory, when you try to store some more data that cannot be accommodatable, at that time your data will be getting truncated. There is a data loss. In this case, I don't want to make my data to be lost. I don't want to waste my memory also. I want to utilize the memory very, very efficiently. I want a very efficient utilization mechanism so that whenever the memory is required, consume the memory, utilize that memory, perform the operations. Once the operation is done, release the memory over here. So that as a developer, it is our responsibility that we need to utilize the memory very, very efficiently. Whenever you need some memory, consume the memory, store some data, and then perform your operations. Once the operations has been done, release that memory here. Okay? So in this case, so that memory can be get allocated to the other people also. In this case, we have to utilize the memory very, very efficiently. So that here, in order to store that value, whenever I'm storing that value, you have to indicate the data type. Based on that, the Apex compiler is going to reserving the required amount of memory for that variable. So now here in this case, what are the various data types are available? Now let's see. When coming to the data type describes two things basically. The first one is what type of data the variable can hold. Whether this variable can store, like as a X variable can store numerical value or string value or date value, Boolean value, what type of value it can store, we need to indicate that. Second one, to store that value, how much memory needs to be get reserved, we need to indicate. In order to indicate these two things, we are using that data type. Okay, data type. So in this case, when coming to the Apex programming, we are having totally two categories of data types are available. Okay, all the data types has been categorized into two types here. What are those two types of data types available in Apex programming? Each and every data type we'll see one by one. Okay, now make a note of this one here. Apex is a tightly coupled programming language. Apex is a tightly coupled programming language which enforces the developer to define the variables before its usage. To define the variable before its usage. To define the variables before its usage. We are having some programming languages, like some VB. It's purely a loosely coupled programming, where defining the variable is not mandatory. Directly we can assign the value here. Okay, now. But Apex is purely a tightly coupled programming. Not only the Apex programming, from the C programming onwards, all are the tightly coupled programming. C, C++, Java, .NET, and your Apex programming, all are tightly coupled programming languages. We have to define the variable first, then only we can use that variable. Okay, now. In this case here, whenever we are defining the variables, we have to use the data types here. Now, each variable should be defined with the respective data type. With the respective data type. With the respect to data type here. Depends upon the type of the value you are going to store, you can define the data type here. Now, data type describes the two things as below. First one, what type of data or the value can be held inside the variable. what type of data or the value can be held inside the variable. The second one, to hold the data, how much memory needs to be get reserved. To hold that variable, to hold that value, how much memory needs to be get reserved. These two things will be getting described by the data type here. These are the two responsibilities of the data type. What type of data the variable can store, and then to store that value, how much memory needs to be get reserved. These two things will be indicating by the data type. Now, so in Apex programming, we are having two categories of data types are available. Apex provides two categories of data types. The first one, primitive data types. Second one is yes object data types. Primitive data types. Second one is yes object data types. Then what do you mean by primitive? What do you mean by yes object? What data types are comes under primitive types? What data types are comes under yes object type? We'll see practically one by one. Now tell me, primitive in the sense what? Primary, that means basic, fundamental. So now what fundamental data types that you are aware of? These are available in every programming language. Integer, character, string, double, decimal, long, Boolean, like that. You are aware of so many fundamental data types. These fundamental data types are comes under primitive data types. Okay, these fundamental data types are comes under primitive data types. But as part of the Apex programming language, what primitive data types are available in Apex programming? Because programming language to programming language, data types may be different. Some are common, but some are different from programming language to programming language. But in Apex programming, what primitive data types that we have? What type of data those data types will support? Now let's see practically here. Now, the first one is the primitive data types. Now, these are the fundamental data types provided by the Apex programming language. For example, so what data types that we have as part of Apex programming? Now let's see. Apex is providing the various primitive data types, like we are having that integer, long, decimal, double, string, ID, Boolean, date, time, object, blob. So these are the various primitive data types has been given by the Apex programming language, like integer, long, decimal, double, string, ID, Boolean, date, time, object, and the blob. So these are the various primitive data types has been given by the Apex programming language. Now, so let's go into detail of each and every data type now. Okay, what type of values that each and every data type will support to store? Okay, these are the various primitive data type. But when coming to the integer, long, decimal, double, string, Boolean, up to common in every programming language. But especially Apex programming is providing some more data type like as ID, date, time, blob, object. So these are specific to the Apex programming language here. Every programming language is having its own fundamental data types, but Apex is providing all these data types to you here. Now let's see each and every data type, how can we use? What each and every data type describes. Okay, now let's see practically in this case. Okay, now the first one, integer. What this integer data type will describe basically? What type of data that we can store? Numerical. Numerical in the sense we are having two types again. Integer, decimal. What type of values we can store? Only integer values, not the decimal point values. Okay. So now this integer data type will allow us to store only the numerical values without any decimal points. Okay. Without any decimal points. Simply like as 10, 70, 1000, 10 lakhs, 1 crore. Like that here, we can able to store only the integer part values, not the decimal values here. Decimal values will not be acceptable by the integer data type. So integer data type will allow us to store the numerical values without any decimal points here. Okay? Now make a note of this one here. It allows us to store numerical values without any decimal points. Without any decimal points. Like for example, 34, 7890, 10,000, 23 lakhs, like that. It won't allow the decimal values here. Decimal values cannot be acceptable. In this case, to store each and every numerical value, how much memory it will reserve? If it is a C programming, for the integer value variable, how much memory will be getting reserved? 2 bytes of memory. If it is Apex programming, 4 bytes will be getting reserved. Okay, 4 bytes will be getting reserved. Programming language to programming language, the memory allocation will be completely different. Inside your Apex programming, each integer variable will occupy the 4 bytes of memory here. Okay, 4 bytes of memory. Now, make a note point here. Each integer variable will occupy 4 bytes of memory. Each integer variable will occupy 4 bytes of memory. Now, so in this case, if it is an integer variable which is having some 4 bytes of memory, then do we have any limit for this one? Like, do we have any range? Like, suppose if it is a C programming, we are having the limitation, like 32,768 to plus 32,767. There is a limitation in terms of thousands only here. Because it is occupying only 2 bytes, but now Apex programming is occupying 4 bytes of memory, more memory. So do we have the chance to store more larger value? Yes, there is a possibility. When coming to that Apex programming will allow us to store the numerical value inside the integer variable, which is having the range between minus 2 to the power of 31 to plus 2 to the power of 31 minus 1. That is the range has been given by Salesforce. Okay, 2 to the power of 31. That means for what is the value over here? Let's see through the calculations. So now here in this case, 2 to the power of 31 here. Okay, 2 to the power of 31. Now tell me this value is in terms of thousands? No. We are having that it's a larger number here. Now it will be having in terms of crores also. Integer data type will allow us to store the values in between the range of crores. Because it is occupying more memory, so it is allowing us to store a larger value also. Okay. So now here in this case, we can able to store the value, okay, minus from this range to plus this range over here, minus 1. Okay. Now, in this case, when coming to that integer data type, it allows us to store the value between the range here. Range is minus 2 to the power of 31 to plus 2 to the power of 31 minus 1. The range has been given by the integer data type to you. We can able to store the larger values also inside this. Now come to the actual point now, which is very, very important as part of ORM concept, object relationship and the mapping. Fundamental concepts are very, very important. If you are able to understand the fundamental concept, then the advanced topics are very, very simple for you. In entire development, 3 topics are majorly important. One is if condition, second one is enhanced for loop, third one is collections. These are simple topics only, not complex, not typical, not lengthy topics. These are simple topics only. If you know these 3 topics, okay, if you are able to play with these 3 topics, then development is very simple, very easy, nothing else. In every program, we are using these 3 features: collections, for loop, if condition. That's it. If you know these 3, how to play with this, then development is very simple. It's not typical, it's not difficult. The people is having some mindset like they are having some phobia. Development is very difficult, not difficult. If you understood the concept is very simple, very easy. Okay, now. So don't buy hard the things, okay? Try to understand the concept. Even though because so many people are from non-technical background, so we'll go a bit slowly as well, no problem. Okay, now. So now here in this case here. Now, let's map this data type now. So whenever I'm going to be defining this integer variable here, now this integer data type will be referencing by which field types now. Upon creating an object here, okay, upon creating an object, okay, inside that object we are creating some columns also. Upon creating the fields inside the object, we are selecting some data types, nothing but some field types. These are the various of field types are available right now. We are having auto number, formula, roll-up summary, lookup, master detail, checkbox, currency, date time. So many data types are available which you are aware of, which we are selecting upon creating the object here, upon creating the field. Now tell me, from these field types, from these data types, which field data types are supporting this integer data type now? Number, okay. Then phone will be having that braces. It will be purely string. Time will be having colon, hours, colon, minutes. Colon is nothing but character. It's a string type. Percent, okay, right. One more. Currency, right. So in this case, whenever we are going to be preparing that column inside my table by selecting either number data type or either it may be a percent also, either it may be currency also, then internally it will be referencing that integer data type. Okay, integer data type. So that each and every currency field, each and every number field, percent fields are going to be referencing that integer data type here. Okay, now make a note here. Upon creating the field inside the object, each currency field, number field, and percent field will reference the integer data type. Integer data type. This point is very, very important as part of ORM concept, object relationship and the mapping. Why? Because is when moving forward during the DOOPS concept, we are discussing about that object relationship and the mapping. There we are going to be describing that every table will be representing in the form of a class, every field inside the table will be representing in the form of a variable. That is the internal architecture of ORM. There you can understand here what exactly the significance of this point here. Okay, now the second data type, string. The second data type is string. So now when you go to some programming languages, To store a single character, we are having character data type. To store multiple characters, we are having string data type. But in Apex programming, we don't have such kind of data types, only string. Okay? It may be single character also, it may be multiple characters also. We have to use same string data type here. Now, in this case, what is the use of the string data type? What kind of data it can hold now? Character values here. Only characters. Can't we store alphanumerical number? Can't we store some special characters? Yes, everything. So that string data type will allow us to store alphanumerical values along with special characters also inside this. Okay? Now, in this case here, for example, I want to store the name some Ramesh. How can we store this value? In order to treat this entire name as a single word, we have to enclose this here. We have to enclose in that single quotation. Upon storing that string values inside that variable, we have to enclose that value characters inside that single quote. Suppose if you want to store only one character here, like as some male, like as some M, that even though it may be a single character also, we have to enclose in that single quotation here. Whatever the string values you would like to store, string values has to be get enclosed in that single quotation here. Okay, now, in this case, suppose for example, if I'm storing that value some Ramesh, then how much memory will be getting reserved? In this case, there is no fixed size. There is no fixed size. Depends upon the number of characters you are going to store. For each character, it is occupying 1 byte of memory here. Here, how many characters I am storing inside this? 6 characters. So that 6 bytes of memory will be getting reserved. So that depends upon the number of characters. Suppose I'm storing one complete sentence. If I'm storing one complete paragraph, at that time it will count how many number of characters are available. Even though if you're having a space is counting as one character inside that. Okay? If you're having some space is also counting as one character. Depends upon the number of characters that we have, those many number of bytes of memory will be getting reserved. Okay? So now here in this case, when coming to the string data type will allow us to store the characters or the alphanumerical values and along with that special characters also. Depends upon the number of characters you are going to store, those many number of bytes of memory will be getting reserved for that variable here. There is no fixed size. Okay? Clear? Now make a note over here. It allows us to store a collection of characters along with the special characters also. Along with the special characters also. Now, each character will occupy one byte of memory. We need to enclose the characters inside the single quote. Because when you go to some other programming, the string values has to be enclosed in the double quotes. When you go to C programming, Java, there we have to enclose in the double quotes, but here purely single quote. For example, like some Ramesh. Like as some M. Welcome to some Apex programming. Like that, we can able to store some ram @ some gmail.com, ram123, like that. Here depends upon your requirement, we can able to store those values. If you understood the data types concept, ORM concept is very easy, very simple. Now tell me, which field types are referencing this string data type now? Okay, text, only text. Text area long, text area rich, email, phone, URL, auto number, text encrypted, okay, and then you are having the geolocation. These are all are referencing the text data type. Along with that, pick list and then pick list multi-select also. Okay. So in this case, we are having so many data types are available. From these data types, email type, geolocation, and then phone type, pick list multi-select, text type, text area long, text area rich, text encrypted, URL. Along with that, auto number also, because here we are going to be giving that auto number value as P hyphen some characters here, some digits. So that here it is also referencing that string data type by default here. Okay? Clear? Now make a note of this one. Each text field, comma, text area long, text area rich, text encrypted, email, phone, URL, auto number, geolocation, pick list multi-select, fields will reference the string data type. These fields are referencing that string data type by default. Next one, Boolean data type. Boolean in the sense what? What type of values it will store? True or false values here. Okay. Now, in this case, now tell me what field types are referencing this Boolean. Checkbox. Checkbox will be having two states. Checkbox may be selected, checkbox may be unselected. Selected means what? This is called as checked status. Checked status means what? It will returning the value as true. If the checkbox is not selected, then it is called as unchecked state. That will be returning the value as what? False. So that checkbox is purely referencing that Boolean data type by default here. Okay. Now, make a note over here. It allows us to store the true or false values. Each checkbox field will reference the Boolean data type by default. Each checkbox field will reference the Boolean data type by default. Because of checkbox means selected, that is indicating the checked status, which will be returning the value true. If the checkbox is unselected, it is called as unchecked status, which will be returning the value as false. True means what? What is the value? 1. False in the sense 0. That means it will store either 1 or 0. That means it is called as what? What is the data type generally? 0 or 1. Call it as what? Binary. Binary in the sense what? One digit, that is called as what? Bit data type here. Okay, it's a bit data type. Bit data type can store either 0 or 1. Any one of that. Next one. Long data type. So what is this long data type basically here? Long data type is an advance of integer. Okay, we can say advance of integer. That means what? Integer is having some limitation that minus 2 to the power of 31 2 plus 2 to the power of 31. But sometimes my business is a very large enterprise. We are generating huge revenue. We are getting the revenue in terms of some millions of crores. At that time, whatever the range has been given by that integer data type, that is not sufficient. I want some more. I want a larger value. I want to store some more range. For that one, we can go with that long data type, which allows us to store the numerical values, only the numerical. That means purely that integer part, not the decimal part over here. Here also, this is also like as the integer, but it will be having some more range. It is having some more range, where it will allow us to store the values to like as minus 2 to the power of 63 2 plus 2 to the power of 63 minus 1. That is the range has been given by Salesforce. Now, for example, 2 to the power of 63 in the sense what? Let's see. 2 to the power of 63. See, this much of larger value. In order to store that large numbers, okay, at that time we can go with that long data type, which doesn't allow the decimal points here. This is also purely integer, but here it will be giving that more range than the integer data type. So in this case, to store this more range, it requires more memory also. Integer is occupying 4 bytes. Now this long will occupying that 8 bytes of memory here. Okay, long will occupy 8 bytes of memory. Okay, now make a note over here. It allows us to store the larger integer values without any decimal points. Without any decimal points. Each long data type variable will occupy 8 bytes of memory. Okay, 8 bytes of memory. And the range is minus 2 to the power of 63 2 plus 2 to the power of 63 minus 1. The range has been given by the long data type. Next one. ID data type. So what is this ID data type indicates? What is the use of this ID data type? To store what? Unique ID in the sense what? Object ID or record ID? Record ID. Record ID contains how many characters? 18 characters. Is it a case sensitive or case insensitive? Case sensitive here. Okay, now, when coming to the record ID, whenever I'm going to be creating a new record inside my object, Salesforce is generating a unique identification number for each and every record that is called as record ID, which is a 18 characters alphanumerical number, which is a case sensitive ID will be generating by Salesforce. Once a record ID has been generated by Salesforce, the same ID will not be repeating by the Salesforce in the entire lifetime. Okay? In the entire lifetime, so the same ID will not be repeated by Salesforce. Here, always a unique ID will be generating by Salesforce here. Okay? Now here in this case, in order to store those record IDs, we are using this ID data type now, which can able to store the complete record ID. It may be either 15 characters ID or it may be 18 characters ID also. Both can be acceptable inside this ID data type. Now tell me, from these field types, what field types are referencing this ID data type right now here? Straightforward, nothing else. Auto number, no. Auto number is designing the value based on our phone format. Text, no. Text data type will allow us to enter how many characters of content? Text data type, 255 characters. But it should be acceptable up to 18 only, not more than that. Automatically. User can't enter the IDs. ID will be generating by always by the Salesforce system itself. No. In Sting, I can give like as one sentence also by giving some space. Lookup, right. So in this case, whenever we are using that lookup association, upon creating the child record, we are selecting the parent record, right? Upon selecting the parent record, what it will store inside that column? Name of that parent record or ID of the parent record? ID. So that here, now that lookup field is going to storing the record ID. Next, one more. Master detail. Next, one more. External. And then one more. Hierarchical association, right. Okay. So now, each and every ID field, in every object we are having the ID field common. ID field and the lookup relationship data type field, master detail relationship data type field, and the external object lookup relationship, and the hierarchical association, all these field types are referencing ID data type by default here internally. Okay? Clear? Now make a note of this one. It allows us to store either 15 or 18 characters record ID. It allows us to store either 15 or 18 characters record ID. Each ID field, lookup relationship field, master detail relationship, external lookup relationship, and the hierarchical relationship field will reference the ID field, ID data type by default. Next, the date. Date data type. What is the use of this date data type now? In order to store some date values, okay, which will be in the form of YY format here. Okay, now. Date values in the form of YY format. Now tell me what field types are referencing this date data type. Date field types here, right. Each date field will reference the date data type by default. Next, time data type here. This is for what? To store that time values in terms of either 12 hours format or 24 hours format. Also, we can store that time value inside this. To store the time value inside the variable. Now, each time field will reference the time data type by default. Next, date time. What is the use of this date time data type? To store both date and time stamp value. Like when you go to that created by, last modified by, deletion date, there you will be having both the date and time value both. At that time, to store the combination of both the date and time stamp value inside that variable, we are using the date time data type. Now, it allows us to store the date time stamp value inside the variable. Each date time field will reference the date time data type by default. Next, the decimal data type. So this is for what? To store what? Decimal values here. Okay, decimal values. Sometimes I want to store some numerical values where integer part also I want to store and the decimal value also I want to store. Like I want to store some 10.50, 2500.75. Like that, I would like to store the numerical values along with some decimal points also. In this case here, we are using this decimal data type where decimal data type will allow us to store the values which can able to have decimal points and maximum of 2 digits after the decimal point here. Whenever we are going to storing some currency values, in that currency, after the decimal point, how many digits we can have? Maximum of how many? Currency. Suppose I'm storing some currency value. At that time, how many digits you can have after the decimal point over here? 2, not more than that. In this case here, we are using this decimal data type because by default, decimal data type will allow us 2 digits after the decimal point over here. Okay? Now, it allows us to store numerical values along with the decimal points up to 2 digits by default. Now, in this case, each and every currency field is referencing the decimal data type by default. Because when you go to the currency, to store that currency value here, it is going to be allowing us to store maximum of 2 digits over there. Okay? Now, each currency field will reference decimal data type by default. Now, in this case, you can raise a question, sir, for some time, I am doing some scientific calculations where I want exact value. Because whenever we are implementing some pharmaceutical applications or some scientific applications at that time, whenever they are doing some calculation, they need the exact result over here. They don't want to round up the values. They don't want to round up. They would like to get the exact value because if the value has been rounded up, then automatically pharma will be getting changed. At that time, I don't want to round up the value, I want exact value. That means I want some more number of digits after the decimal point over here. At that time, we can able to go with that double data type. Double data type will allow us to place more than 2 digits after the decimal point also. Okay? Now, allows us to store the numerical values along with the decimal points more than 2 digits. For example, sometimes I want to store the pi value, like a 3.1416. I want to do the calculation of 10 by 3, like some 3.3333, like that I want the exact value. At that time, we can go with the decimal double data type here. The next one, blob data type. Blob means what? What is the full form of blob? Full form. Blob in the sense, binary large objects. Okay, binary large objects. Then what do you mean by these binary large objects, and where we can use this blob data type generally? To store what? Images, pictures, documents, PDF files, audio files, video files. At that time, we can use this blob data type. Okay. So now, whenever we are storing some static content, like some images which can't be changed, which can't be modified, which can't be editable, some pictures, some audio files, some video files, some text documents, some Word documents, and some attachments. At that time, here we are using this blob data type. Because whenever I'm going to be adding an attachment, okay, inside my record, for example, come to a general scenario. Assume that I'm having a case record. I'm having a case record here. I've raised the case, okay, regarding my webcam is unable to capture the video. So whenever I'm using the newly purchased webcam, it is not capturing the images properly. So that I'm raising a complaint to the customer care, so that here I'm creating a case record. So in this case here, might be some settings may be different. I haven't enabled those settings, so that I'm unable to capture the images properly through this webcam. In this case, when I raise a complaint, okay, to that customer care, the customer care people are unable to understand my problem, what exactly it is. So that he asked me to take a screenshot of that problem. He asked me to send that attachment also here, along with the case. So then what needs to be done? I need to go to that case record. Here we need to add the attachments over here. Go to the attachments section, and then click on that attach file. Select that image here, which you would like to add it as an attachment here. For example, I would like to take an image. Okay, I would like to take an image over here. I'm taking up an image. I'm going to be adding as an attachment. Once you click on attach file, the file will be getting attached. Click on that done button. So now, as soon as whenever I'm going to be attaching that file, then how this file will be getting stored here? How the file will be getting stored inside the database? Exactly in the same image format? No. So this is a .png format here. This is a PNG file. So now in this case, here is an image. Image will not be storing into the database directly. Files cannot be storing into the database directly. Pictures can't be storing into the database directly. So whatever the image, whatever the file, whatever the document, whatever the content that we are trying to be uploading, that content is going to be converting into the binary format. That binary format of content will be storing inside that column by default here. So at that time, it is converting that image into that binary format here. Suppose whenever we are opening that image, it will collect that binary content that will be converting into the actual format. That actual format of image will be getting visibility. Converting from the image to the binary, binary to the image here. That conversion process is available inbuilt in Salesforce. So that no need to do that conversion manually by our own, that will be taken care by the Salesforce itself. So in this case, databases are not having the capability to store the images exactly in the same format inside the database. So we need to convert that information into the binary format, because here, so that we can able to reduce that content size. We can reduce that image size. We can reduce that memory, so that here, by occupying very less memory, we can able to store that image content inside this. For that one, we can able to utilize the database memory very, very efficiently. For that reason, here they are going to be converting that image into that binary format here. Now, in this case, whenever we are going to storing these kind of images or pictures, audio files, documents, zip files, anything, they are going to be storing in the form of blob data type. Now tell me where we are using this blob data type generally. Documents, right? Document object. In order to upload some images, pictures, which you are referencing in the multiple places inside your organization, we are uploading all those static resources inside the document object. And what are the attachments we are adding over here? Those will be storing in the form of blob data type. Okay? Clear? Now make a note over here. It allows us to store the binary content of an image or picture or document or a file or an audio or video file. Video file. Now, all the static resources, that is document object, and attachments will be storing inside the object in the form of blob data type. In the form of blob data type. Next, the last one, object. So what do you mean by this object data type here? Anybody is aware of Java programming? I won't ask any question, at least raise the hand. One person. No one? Okay. 3. Any more? So in Java programming, you are having a fundamental concept that for the Java programming, there is a base class. What is the base class of Java programming? Object. Object. Object is a base class. That means upon building the Java programming, they have prepared a first class that is called as object. That is a root class here. Okay, that is a root class from which all the other classes has been derived. So in this case here also, when coming to the data type, we have discussed so many data types over here as of now. Like as we have discussed, integer, string, double, decimal, string, ID, all these things. Generally when you go to the C programming, these are all are nothing but tokens. Token means some reserved words, system defined words. But in Apex programming, these are not the tokens, these are the classes. Okay, these are the classes which has been prepared by the Apex programming language. Each and every data type is nothing but a class. Okay, every data type is nothing but a class. Integer is a class, long is a class, decimal is a class, double is a class, string is a class. These are all of the classes which has been given by the Apex programming language by default. So now, upon building these classes here, they have prepared the first class that is called as object. Object is a base class for the Apex programming also, because Salesforce is purely built upon, the basic underlying architecture has been purely built upon Java programming. Okay, the basic underlying architecture of Salesforce is purely built upon Java programming here. So now here from there onwards, they have started using Apex programming Visual Force to build the rest of the features. Okay, so now here in this case, when coming to that Apex programming, the base class is object. So upon building that, the Salesforce implementation, the first class which they have implemented as object. But in this case, what are the data types you have discussed? These are the classes here. Now this integer can store only the numerical values. Lang can store lang values. Blob can store binary values. String can store string values. ID can store ID values. Boolean can store some Boolean values. But sometimes, whenever I'm fetching some data from the database, it will be returning some value to me. But what value it will return, I don't know. It may return some integer value also. It may return some Boolean also. It may return some string also. It may return some date value also. I don't know what type of value that database will return. At that time, how can we store that value inside my variable here? Now, in this case, to store any type of value inside a variable, we need a data type. We need a generic data type that is called as object. Object is a generic data type. It's a common data type which can able to store any type of value as of now. It can store integer value. It can store decimal value. It can store Boolean value. It can store some binary value. It can store some ID value. It can store date value, time value, everything. In this case, to store any type of value, we are using one common data type. We are using one generic data type that is called as object. So object is the base class for the Apex programming also, so which will be having the capabilities to store any type of value inside this. Okay, which will be having the capability to store any type of value. When you go to some VB.NET or VB programming, there you will be having a data type called as a variant. Okay, variant data type, which can store any type of value. Like the similar way here also, we are having this object data type, which can store any type of value. Only one value it will store, not multiple. That value may be either integer, decimal, Boolean, whatever, anything. But if I'm defining the variable of type Boolean, it will store only Boolean values, not other types here. If I'm defining the variable of date, it will store only date values, not time value, not other values here. But this object variable can store any type of value also. It's a generic data type which has been given by Apex programming language by default. Okay? Clear? Now make a note of this one. Now, it is a generic data type which allows us to store any type of value inside the variable. Which allows us to store any type of value inside the variable. It is a base class for the Apex programming. It is a base class for the Apex programming. These are the various primitive data types are available when coming to your Apex programming. These are the primitive data types. Okay, clear? Now, so in this case, whenever I'm having a variable of type double, it will store only one double value. If you want to store some binary value, we are using that blob data type. If you want to store any type of value, then we are using object here. Now let's come to a situation. Sometimes I want to store one account record. Account record I want to store. Account record contains what? So many values. Account ID is there, and the owner ID is there, name, rating, industry, annual revenue, phone, fax, billing address, shipping address, website, customer priority, SLA information, active status. So many values are available here. Not only one, multiple values. But all the values are not same type. ID value is ID data type here. And the name is a string type. Rating, string type. Industry, string type. Annual revenue, currency type. Active status, string type. Like that, different types of values are available. I want to store that complete record. Then how can we store? In this case, to store your Salesforce object records, Salesforce has given that second category of data type that is called as S-object data types. S-object means what? Salesforce object. Salesforce object means what? Both combination of standard and custom object. The combination of both standard objects and custom objects are called as S-object. That means Salesforce objects. Okay? Now, So now let's see the second category, yes subject data types. Now, so now yes subject data types are allows us to store what? Your Salesforce object records. It may be standard object record also, custom object record also. To store that object records, we are using this yes subject data type. Okay? Now, in this case, yes object means what? Yes means a Salesforce. Okay, Salesforce object. Combination of both standard and custom objects are called as Salesforce objects. I want to store one account record here. For that one, I want a data type. I want to store my case record. For that one, I want a data type. I want to store lead record. I want a data type. I want to store my customer record, which is my custom object. I want a data type. I want to store my loan record, so that I need a data type. For that one, for every object, Salesforce is giving a data type over here. There, the data type is exactly same like as your table name exactly. You know how the table names will be visible over here. For account object, what is the table name? Account. Contact object, table name? Contact. Lead object? Case object? Position object? Position underscore underscore C. Customer object? Customer underscore underscore C. Loan object? Loan underscore underscore C. These are the data types of yes object, nothing else. Okay? Now in this case here, in order to store your Salesforce object records, but as of now, we have discussed so many data types which will allow us to store only one value, not multiple. But when I try to store my record might be having so many values. To store the records information, we need a data type which can able to hold the complete record information. So that Salesforce has given the data type called as yes object data types, which are used to store the Salesforce object records. Okay? Clear? Now make a note of this one here. These are used to store the Salesforce object records inside the variable. These are used to store the Salesforce object records inside the variable. Each Salesforce object, it may be standard, it may be custom, has been represented in the form of a data type. In the form of a data type, where the object name and the data type name both are similar. Both are similar. Both are similar. Now, in this case here, so in this case, for example, we are having the data types. Now tell me what are the data types that we have now as part of a subject? Account, contact, opportunity, case, solution, lead, task, group, user, like that here. Along with that, you will be having your own custom object classes also available, right? Yes, we are having that, the position underscore underscore C, customer underscore underscore C, hiring manager underscore underscore C, loan underscore underscore C. Like that here, each and every object will be represented in the form of a class, where your object API name and the class name, data type name exactly similar. In order to store your Salesforce object records inside your variable, we are going to be defining that variable with the help of that yes object data type. Now, sometimes they will raise a question in the interview point of view. Today, I send a request to the database to search for some information. That information may be found in account class also, account object also, lead object also, case object also, in some other object also, I don't know. It will be returning that record here. Then in this case, if it is returning an account record, I want to store inside a variable. If it is returning a case record, I want to store. If it is returning a position object record, we need to store. So now here in this case, we need a data type which is a generic one, which is a common one, which can able to store any record here, any object record. But if I am defining that account, now this account data type can store only account records, not other object records. Now this data type can store only the contact record. This data type can store only lead record. This data type can store only hiring manager record. But sometimes I want a generic data type which can able to store any object record also. That may be account record, case record, lead record, my custom object record, whatever it may be here. I want a data type which can able to store any object record here. For that one, Salesforce has given a data type called as yes object. Yes object is a data type which is a generic data type which allows us to store any object record inside this here. Okay? Now, yes object data type here. It is a generic data type which can store any object record inside the variable. Which can store any object record inside the variable. Okay. So these are the two categories of data types are available when coming to your Apex programming. We have primitive data types and we are having yes object data types. Okay. Clear? Now. So by using these data types, how to define the variables, how to store the values, and then upon defining the variable, what kind of rules, what kind of standards we need to follow, how to assign the value, how to retrieve the value, we'll see practically. And then what are the various other fundamental building blocks are available, we'll see in tomorrow's session. Okay.